everyone. There will not be a Positive Minds episode today. In its place, we thought we would share with you the episode of Ignite That Light, where the host, Positively Chris, interviewed moi, Myndrunner, for the first time and possibly began the origin of Positive Minds. So sit back, relax, kick your feet up, enjoy yourselves for a trip down memory lane. Here is a very special episode of Ignite That Light with a very special guest, Myndrunner.
Welcome to episode 8 of Ignite That Light. We are here. So, the topic today is celebrating small wins and milestones. My guest today is the fabulous, the wonderful, the sensational Myndrunner. Also can be found on the X app at Myndrunner with a Y, MYND runner. Don't miss him. Make sure you follow him if you haven't followed him already. We're grateful to have you here today, Myndrunner. Want to talk about celebrating small wins and milestones. But before we get there, I want to remind people the focus of this podcast, of this conversation, is always motivating, inspiring, and connecting more deeply with others. If you don't feel motivated, inspired, or feel like you're connecting closer to anybody here in this conversation, that means if we have failed you, let me know. I take that feedback. Make sure you comment, like, subscribe, do all the fun things that you should be doing if you're listening to this or following us on X, on YouTube, on the local streaming services, on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts. Find a way to get in touch with us. I know that we have there are plenty of ways to let us know your feedback. I want to be mindful of everyone's of what they're getting out of this and the value that we're putting out there into the world. So with that,
tell us what you think, please.
There you go. Exactly. Listen to Myndrunner. No, but super grateful for your time. We got to know for sure. And with that, yes, we have the wonderful Myndrunner here with us today. And again, the topic today, celebrating small wins and milestones. It's something that I've been thinking about lately because I think we live in a world where there's always this big picture. Everyone's looking for that huge home run, that success, that huge win, whether it's getting that amazing new promotion. And hey, I've fallen victim to that as well. The new promotion, the latest, I want the new car, I want a bigger house. Like, there are all these big wins, but it's worth remembering, in my opinion, that you don't really get there overnight, and it's worth celebrating the small victories in the meantime. But wanted to throw it over to you, Myndrunner. Before we get started too deep, though, make sure that people know kind of a little, before we go into that topic, though, want to know more about you real quick. Let people know who you are, so that way they at least know your background, or at least know why they should be listening to you about this conversation.
Well, I'm a Sagittarius, and my favorite color is purple. I like long walks on the beach. I have started my own podcast called Mental Health Mondays. Very similar. I almost feel like it's a sister podcast to Ignite That Light, but we both kind of have two slightly different focuses. Where I love the Ignite the Light theme of, hey, what inspires you? What's finding that inner self. Where Mental Health Mondays, it's much more. It's stories from various different people who struggle and have successes, which ties into our topic today with mental health, and like how they've overcome, strategies they've used to overcome. I've had people talk about life after suicide attempts and how things have turned around. ADHD. I've learned so much as I'm listening. Some philosophy I think you and I share is listening and learning, is where asking those questions and then learning from others, because there's so much I've learned about ADHD, misconceptions I had about autism and mental health. And these kind of podcasts, not even 10 years ago, I think they would have been frowned upon, because it's kind of like mental health was such a taboo subject, and especially with guys. You know, it was almost like suck it up, Buttercup, go be tough, put your big boy pants on. But now we're able to really talk about it and in a much better way. So please check out on YouTube Mental Health Mondays. It's the one with the big smiley face on it, and I think it's funny too because I've talked to reverends about sex, and I've interviewed a Playboy Playmate, and we talked about religion. So it's like you don't know what to expect in any one of these episodes. So it's really cool. Please check it out. Please also comment below here too. Yes. Let us know what you're thinking. But it's been awesome, and also through Twitter Spaces and through YouTube, through a lot of different social media platforms, I've met a lot of great people, kindred spirits, including Jordan Gordon Lorden himself, Positively Chris, and it's been pretty cool, pretty awesome, and come join the community.
For sure. Yeah, and I appreciate you saying that, Myndrunner. Yeah, make sure you follow Myndrunner and subscribe to his Mental Health Mondays podcast on YouTube. Find him on X, on the X app, as I said, at Myndrunner with a Y. And yeah, I appreciate you saying that and introducing yourself to the group, to the family, to the igniters is what I'll call them. Everyone who listens to this igniter. And
let's go ignite.
There you go. And speaking of that, again, going to the topic here at hand, I'd love to hear kind of just, again, from your perspective, what are some, I guess, psychological or emotional or mental benefits that you can think of that come from celebrating the smaller wins versus the bigger wins? Can you give a few?
Absolutely. And just to kind of further my resume, if you will, I'm a school teacher for over 10 years, elementary school. I've mostly taught third grade, which is, to me, is that my favorite grade because that's when kids are kind of really starting to come into their own. If you look at Erickson and Piaget and a lot of the child behaviorists, that's when kids are really starting to form their identity. And what's really great is you can see the beginnings of future adult personalities. You can kind of start to see how things progress. And one of the things that's going on in education, and it's kind of a unspoken battle, but if you talk to any teacher, they'll tell you what's going on, is there's a big push now by teachers and select administrators to really get away from judging everybody by a standard and judging every student by growth, by personal growth. One of the things I tell all my students is don't compare yourself to anybody else in the classroom except one person, who you were yesterday or who you were at the beginning of the year. And I think that's important when it comes to celebrating victories, because a lot of times, and this is with adults too, a lot of times we look at our goals. We'll set a goal and we look how far away that goal is, and it becomes overwhelming, it becomes depressing. We're looking at the top of the mountain. We're not looking at those baby steps. And it's so important that you got to celebrate those victories. When my first week of teaching, in fact, usually my first day, I'll do, and I stole this from somebody. I'm sorry, I forget who it was, but I write 10 math problems on the board, and I have everybody compute. You already know where I'm going with this. I write 10 math problems on the board, and then I let everybody compute them, and it's easy, simple, basic addition, like 4 + 5 = 9. Then I go and I put all the answers, but one of them, like I'll do 4 + 5 = 10. And then I'll just walk away and I'll say, there's the answers. And then immediately the kids, oh. And they'll go, Mr. Burden, that one's wrong. Mr. Burden, 4 + 5 is 9, not 10. And I'm like, are you sure? And we get in a little debate, and I get them to prove it. And then go, oh, you're right. And I erased 10 and put 9. I said, isn't that interesting that we all focused on the one I got wrong and not the 9 other problems that I got correct? And then it leads into that discussion about, now if I did this again, I only have one problem to learn to fix. There's only one thing to fix. Then I've got it perfect. And that's what I think sometimes we tend to compare ourselves to other people or compare ourselves to who we want to be. And we don't take the time to celebrate how far we've come. That's whether it's weight loss, whether it's like overcoming an addiction, whether it's just improving anything, or sometimes it could just be simply any task that you feel is daunting. you can't eat an elephant in one bite. You've got to take one bite at a time. It's not going to happen like this.
Yep.
And you got to have patience for yourself, but you got to celebrate those victories, and you'll feel better about it. And sometimes it might be okay. Hey, maybe I don't have the body I used to, but if I can work out twice this week, if I could do 10 minutes of aerobics this week, then I'll go get a Starbucks, or I'll treat myself to something. You got to treat yourself. And I think that's what's very important is to have, put those rewards out there, but you really got to celebrate how far you've come. And it doesn't mean you stop there, but it's important to know that it's easier to achieve your goals if you're also celebrating those victories.
For sure, Myndrunner. I think it's a fantastic point, and I appreciate you saying that because, there's a popular or a commonly heard expression, one day at a time. And the reason why that exists, right, is to remember that every day is its own unique challenge. Mm-hmm. And the fact that you've gotten through that previous day and you're on to the next one is a sign that you can do it, right? It's really stacking up these victories, these small victories.
Yeah.
And I think that's sometimes easy to forget that we need to get, in order to get wherever we're trying to go, right? And it comes even something like, for me, when I was just as an example, I did I'll say I took 1 year of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, right? And I was awful. Like I was watching UFC thinking that I could be like the next Forrest Griffin or something. I thought I was gonna go and be the next
Chris
one.
Gracie.
There you go. That's me, right?
Yeah.
And so I thought I was going to be the next one, and I mean I was dreadful. And the funny thing is, my the only person at the dojo, or the only person who was there that actually was around the same size as I was the sensei himself, and he was about twice my age. Mm-hmm. But I'm telling you, the strength that he had in his body, I mean, I was struggling. And I'm telling you, like, there was one day where within about 30 seconds, he had me completely just, I was tapped out within less than 30 seconds into rolling with him. Like, I'm done. Like, and but what happens is that was the first time we rolled together on the mat, mm-hmm. And the next time I was able to handle myself for a good 2-3 minutes, and you start to kind of realize, like, actually I'm learning something here. Yeah. I'm picking up my own skill set. It's a small win if you can get another 30 seconds of time without mm-hmm. giving up against the sensei himself. Like, you get like another 30 seconds, you build up that time, and you build up the muscle really at the end of the day. And I think that's it. That I didn't really appreciate it until looking back and saying, you know what, like I've come a long way. Like, and I probably should have been celebrating those victories, getting through another 45-minute class or hour-long class and hanging in there with everyone, right? Like it seems crazy to think about sometimes, but these are actually achievements. And whether mm-hmm. you're me, or even if like you're a parent who just, you have trying to get the 2 kids out the door in time for school, like getting them to school without like pulling your hair out is a small win, whether you realize it or not. Sometimes it's like, oh, well, of course they need to get to school. Like, that's what a parent does. And I get that. I genuinely do. But it's also worth remembering that none of this happens unless you help make it happen. Mm-hmm. Right. And I think that's something, again, it resonates with me because I am a parent and I get that, but it's hard to remember it in the moment. You're like, man, I did awful today. Like I suck. Like we and that's how it can feel like that. Right. But really, you got to grade yourself on a curve, Myndrunner.
You do. You got it. And we're humans. We got to give ourselves some slack too. As long, if you're making the effort, that's what's important. I like also kind of talking about a little bit about quitting. Like if you were to get back into jiu-jitsu, in fact, maybe I'll tell Rhino Ray that you we're doing some jiu-jitsu, because I know he'll get fired up about that. Hey, brother, let's go, man. We're going to do some. I love that dude. But
you made him sound like Hulk Hogan right there.
What you gonna do, brother? But the thing it's interesting too, because even like if you quit, like you go, you've made progress, but you quit. And a very famous fictional dwarf character from Game of Thrones once said that if you don't worry about starting over or starting again. Don't get down on yourself about that. And I'm paraphrasing because he said it much more eloquently than I can. But basically what he said was, don't worry about starting over, because you're now starting over with all of the experience that you've had before. You know, you may have lost some progress. Maybe you got a little rusty here and there, but you have that experience now. Yeah. And I think that's one of the things that's important, because we're human and life happens. You know, I've been trying to lose weight for a long time, and I'll get going really good, and then something happens. And God forbid, when COVID happened, that was like, you know, oh, I get to stay home and and teach on the computer. Throw me in that briar patch, you know, like, oh yeah, oh good. But yeah, you've got to celebrate your victories, and you've got to also acknowledge the progress that you've made. And even if you step away for a while, when you come back, you're not coming back as a novice. You're not starting completely over, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. And I think you and I have talked about this in the past, maybe offline and previously, about the gap and the gain, that idea that you think about or focus on how far you've come versus focusing on the idealized or the optimal state, right? And I think that's something that I wish I had understood the concept of earlier on in life. I'm in my fourth decade on this planet now, and realizing that, like,
congratulations, that's a victory.
It is a victory. It kind of is, right? But there are things that I instead of focusing on the ideal, focus on how far I've come, and start to appreciate that a little more. And again, some people have a variety. They have different ways of celebrating or acknowledging these wins, right? And I'd love to talk about that in a moment. Kind of like, do you have a practice of gratitude? Like, do you wake up in the morning? Do you express gratitude? Just again, if you're willing to share that, like, do you have like a gratitude journal? Do you write things down? Do you just tell yourself things? Like, curious kind of how you embrace that, like in terms of like celebrating small ones, or how again, even if you don't, like, what are some ways that you can think of that people can potentially do that?
Well, Chris, that's a bit personal. I mean, I don't know. Now, of course. No, absolutely. In fact, some people might be surprised to learn that I am somewhat of a religious person, but also I'm a very critical. I'm a cynic and critical thinker, and I'm very skeptical, but also very idealistic, which is kind of an interesting combo. But I've said this before. It's less polar opposites. It's more of like a symbiosis, you know. And one of the things that I've practiced over the last decade or so is having I have a morning prayer, and I have like a morning kind of meditation. And you don't have to necessarily have a prayer. It works for me, but regardless, is having that early morning just moment. It pauses everything, because it's so easy, especially when you have kids, that you're like, oh, all right, put your socks on. Oh, we gotta get this. Don't forget your pickle. Did you turn this in? You know, that kind of thing. And it's easy to get caught up in that. But if you can, and even if it's like on your way driving to work, or take a moment right when you sit down at your desk, or wherever you go, just take a moment, even if it's just 5 minutes. What I do is I'll do the Lord's Prayer, and then I'll just kind of, think about the day, but I'll think about the things I'm thankful for. And I used to be like, when people started talking about gratitude, and I think some of it was because there was a lot of people that just read a book, and now they're like, gratitude, I'm grateful. And they weren't really, they were just saying because they read a book. But true gratitude, there's a lot of people that when you're truly grateful for what you have, and you, like in my case, I'll thank the Lord for this, or this in my life, or this worked for me. Thank you for this. And then I'll pray about things that are beyond my control, or help me handle this situation. And if you're not a religious person, you can still do this, and just be more of a meditation kind of thing. But it puts you in that gratefulness, and it puts you in that perspective of where you are, what's within your control, and what is not. And it's really changed the way I approach the day. Yeah. Because I used to be that gotta shave, gotta get out the door, gotta do this, gotta do blah, 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 blah. Before I know it, it's like half the day is gone, and I'm just like, what's going on? I become a zombie. So yeah, you've got to take that time, and it does make you realize what you do have going for you, and it
For sure.
really does help you with gratitude.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Mindrunner. I
Mhm.
think that it's easy to kind of feel like you're
Mhm.
kind of like this fish, kind of at the whims of the ocean or of
Yeah,
the water, right? You sort of have to kind of go wherever it takes you. It's easy to sort of feel like that's what's happening, and you just have to kind of ride it out. But I think if you do hit that pause button, or you hit that
mhm.
button early on in the morning, and you say, you know what, like, I just want to express gratitude for another day, or for whatever your blessings are, whatever, however you do that. You don't have to necessarily, it doesn't have to be a prayer necessarily, but I think just taking a moment to kind of appreciate what you do have.
Yeah.
I think it's been powerful for me. I did some meditation. I did it habitually for about a year, and I used one of the guided meditation apps that exist out there. There's tons of them. If you
Mhm.
throw a little search on the Google machine, you'll find a few. But I chose one of them. I paid the money to do the full year long kind of experience, and it was definitely something I needed at the time, right?
Yeah.
And I think I probably still should get back into it. I haven't done it in a while, but I needed it at the time when I just needed like a pause button on my life. Things were going kind of crazy. We had a
Mhm.
newborn baby on the way. Like, there was a lot of things, like work was getting a little intense. There were a lot of things that were going on where I felt like the same way, right? That like that everything was kind of off on its own, and I kind of had to be at the whims of everyone
Yeah.
else. And it helped really, I think, reset. I did it the first thing in the morning every day for a year almost, and it was a game changer in terms of how I viewed the rest of the day. Like, the rest of the day, whenever I did this, I found that, like, I felt more in control of my day. Even if I
Mhm.
wasn't, I at least felt like, you know what, like, I've at least put something out there into the world where
Mhm.
I've shown my gratitude, I've expressed myself. And the rest of the day, once you've done that, it sort of seems to kind of be manageable when you
Yeah.
start to realize what you do have going for you. So for me, that worked. Again, your mileage may vary; it may not work for everyone, but
Yeah.
it's worth considering, at least doing, if you haven't considered it in the past. And anyone who listens or watches this, hopefully they've at least, if they feel like that could benefit them,
Mhm.
hopefully they'll give it a shot.
If I could add one thing too, because what you just said is very key. And
Yeah,
I
yeah,
when I first would think about meditation, I always thought it was like that. And like, I mean, and good for people that go with mantras and all that jazz. But
absolutely.
like what I think you and I are talking about, what most people I think might understand is meditation and or prayer. It's not just sitting there and blanking your mind. It's much more just kind of, well, it's sort of, but it's really kind of putting your focus on where you are, your
Yeah,
realm of control and your realm of concern. And the other thing I was going to highlight too that you made me think of this is we also have to be patient with ourselves. And I think sometimes we, like when we meditate or we pray or we have a goal, this goes back to why you got to celebrate those smaller victories, because I think sometimes we're expecting things to change like that. Well, I meditated today, so I should have a good day. Well, that doesn't guarantee that
doesn't
the shit's
always
not going to
work
hit the
that
fan
way.
or the
That's
stuff's
right.
not going to hit the fan. Sorry for the language, but like it doesn't mean that you're not going to have a rough day, but it's going to be a lot. It's going to be somewhat easier to manage if you have a better perspective and a better schema of what the day is going to be.
For sure, Mindrunner. Yeah, spot on. And I think you've hit a key point, which is that none of this
Mhm.
is, kind of the key theme of this conversation. I feel like is none of this is going to happen overnight. It's going to take time and consistency, right? And when you celebrate the smaller wins, or you get into these habits that are positive for you,
Mhm.
you're not going to see immediate results usually. And you might, but you might find
Yeah.
that some of these things will have huge positive benefits early on. But the reality is that most of the things that I can think of that are beneficial in that sense take time to kind of get there, right? You're not
Yeah.
going to find a home run when you really should be, trying to go for singles, I guess, is
Yeah,
the sports
exactly. Get
analogy.
on base first, right? Get
That's
on
right.
base.
That's
Exactly.
right. And so I think that this is fantastic. And I did some research actually. I looked online, and I don't know if this will let me share my screen, but I'm going to try to anyway. Since I haven't actually done this on a conversation with anyone, but I'm going to share just
Yeah.
because I have a moment. And I've been looking at this article called "The Power of Small Wins," and I don't know if you can see kind of what I'm sharing. It may not let me share it, but here's
Oh, it's right here.
yeah, it's really cool. It's to your side. Let me scroll up, but it's a Harvard Business Review article, and I encourage people to kind of throw this in their Google machine and look for this. But the idea that this is a more professional side, right? Thinking about how to get people to to achieve better results at work, and what they're finding is that you can't just tell people you need to do X, Y, and Z, you're going to be fantastic at work. Like there's something called the progress principle. It says of all the things that can boost emotions, motivation, and perceptions during a workday, the single most important in making progress in meaningful work. And I think that the reason why I wanted to share this, Myndrunner, is because I think that's really kind of what we're talking about. When you think about long-term vision and how these all stack up, there needs to be a sense of meaning, of purpose, I think, in what we're doing. I think, and that's just my personal opinion. I could be wrong, but I think whenever you're trying to, find, that huge win or whatever that might be, really at the end of the day, what's really going to kind of get you there, I think, long term, and in terms of getting you consistently to hitting these singles, is really feeling like there's a purpose or meaning to it, right? If you don't feel like there is a true purpose, and again, I'll stop sharing here in a second, I think that's kind of where my head's at. And again, that's a professional side, that's the HBR side of the house, but wanted to share that because, we're talking about personal victories, but also I think professionally, it also plays in when you think about small wins. And I myself have had, in my professional life, have felt like, I feel like I'm not getting anywhere professionally at times. And what it is that it's something that's usually it's like a new project or a new job or a new task. And what I found, and maybe this is different for everyone, but it takes me at least a good 6 months on any like brand new role that I'm in to really feel like I'm understanding what's going on. And I think that's just something worth remembering, is that, like, again, going back to the smaller wins and celebrating them, you're making it through day by day. You're learning something new, you're growing. And all of this is there's an overarching meaning and purpose to what you're doing. If you understand that, I think that's going to help you kind of hang in there to get to those larger wins. And that's kind of the point of what I'm saying.
Absolutely. In fact, I encourage you to do this too, but go back and see my first couple episodes of Mental Health Mondays versus how they are now. Because I'm like, oh, everybody, it's Mental Health Mondays. Can you hear me? My mic isn't working. Oh, but you're absolutely right in the professional setting, because I think it all links together. And what's great is a lot of the stuff that I learned in the classroom for child psychology and behavior management and encouraging growth, they're basically little adults. This is the beginning of what's going to future adults. And you can kind of see where these things are starting before they become adults. And you see the stuff that works for them works for us too. And what I mean by that too is, like, celebrate, when we go back to talk about celebrating victories, one of the things that was really interesting in teaching is the education department, which that could be a whole other podcast, talking about how the education needs to change. But they'll get like a deal. They'll get like some discount from some new tech company. And they're like, hey, use our app instead of the Google app, or use our app instead of this. And so they roll out this new technology to all the teachers. Now, mind you, at least half, if not more, of these teachers, they've already, they're comfortable with their own, what they do. And they're not very, technology is not their wheelhouse. They're much more, their education's their wheelhouse, but just because you're a teacher doesn't mean you're also tech savvy. And so they rely on a lot of us more tech savvy teachers to help walk them through. But also something to consider is some people take it to like a fish to water, but some of the slower learners aren't necessarily it's not a sign of incompetence to be a slower learner. In fact, sometimes that's a sign of a deeper learner. I've had students that took a longer time to understand a concept, but once they did, it was trapped in, it was locked in, and they got it. And that's the same for us adults, is that you've got to, sometimes it might take you longer, but that might be because you're looking at it from a different perspective, where you're thinking, you're learning it your way.
Absolutely.
And you're absorbing it your way so that you can understand it. And that's, again, goes back to that patience with yourself, is you've got to be patient. Like my first pod, and that's why I encourage people, if you're thinking about getting into something, but you're intimidated by the tech or by if you're intimidated by what you don't know, that's actually a sign that you are probably going to be really good about it, because you identify that there's stuff you don't know and you're prepared for it. It's sometimes the people that think they know it that end up doing terrible. But if you go into something with the perspective of, this is something I don't know, but just do it, and don't expect it to be perfect. In fact, if it's a disaster, at least you did it, because now you can only go up from there.
No, that's it. Yeah, you're right, Myndrunner. I think that what you're describing is, to me, that's powerful, because of the fact that what you're describing is, it's like self-awareness and humility. And I think a lot of, again, I'm not speaking for everyone, but a lot of kind of what we see nowadays in the world, and this is me pontificating, so give me a second, but I feel like, this is a, it's sometimes you not knowing something is no longer considered a sign of, I think, that it's not necessarily a good thing for people. Like, if it's almost like you have to know, and you have to feel like, you can't apologize for not knowing, and you can't apologize for failing, and all of that's kind of frowned upon. The reality is, like, self-awareness, knowing that or it's something called, I learned about this at work, actually, the idea of, like, there's like the quadrants of conscious competence and unconscious incompetence, and the idea, like, where you fit on, or where your skills kind of reside on that grid, or on that quadrant. It's worth knowing, like, are you consciously competent in this? Yes. Do you know that you're good at something, right?
Yeah.
And is there something that maybe you're good at that you don't realize? And hey, guess what? You might need your friends to tell you that, right? I'll say right now, you may not realize this, Myndrunner, but you're really good at hosting a Mental Health Monday show but like, podcasting is probably something that
don't start singing for American Idol,
There you go. But there are certain things that maybe you are really good at that you don't know. And I think it's worth remembering that, going back to what you said, it's that self-awareness and that humility should be embraced. And anybody who says, I'm actually kind of concerned about this, you're right. They probably are going to be really good at it, because they know that there is a set of skills to learn. And I was actually going to look up this phrase and maybe share it with the group here too, with everyone who's listening and watching. It's a word. It's a Zen concept called Shoshin, and the author James Clear, who I believe is the author of Atomic Habits, he wrote an article about it, and I will share my screen since we have a moment, and because I'm getting really good at this.
Awesome. Hey, celebrate your victories, right?
This is a small victory. I'm able to share my screen.
Look, and there it is, right there. Look at that, right there. This Zen concept. There it is.
Yep. So the article says it's the Zen concept that will help you stop being a slave to old beliefs. And it's this idea that, and I'm going to read parts of this just because I think it is fascinating. And it says that this phenomenon, our tendency to repeat the behavior we are exposed to, extends to nearly everything we learn in life. So if you have political or religious beliefs, they're mostly a result of the system you were raised in. Although you may not agree on every issue, your parents' political attitudes tend to shape your political attitudes. And so it tends to be a result of these things. But it says, here's the hard question. Who's to say that the way you originally learned something is the best way? What if you simply learned one way of doing things, but not the way of doing things? And so the article really kind of dives deep into why this concept called Shoshin, or beginner's mind, or beginner's mindset, why it's so powerful and why it's so useful in day to day. It's like letting go of your preconceptions and having an attitude of openness. And I think that being willing to expose yourself to something new and to grow, again, this takes a little bit of humility. You have to be willing to say, I don't know everything. And it comes from this phrase, In the beginner's mind, there are many possibilities, but in the experts, there are few. And so it says, let go of the need.
Deep. Yeah, that's
It's
good.
deep. It's really deep. I mean, there's they also link you to Marshall Goldsmith's book, What Got You Here Won't Get You There. Another fascinating read if you haven't read that. But the idea is that it says many people have an overwhelming need to provide value to the people around them. It sounds like a great thing on the surface, but in practice, it can handicap your success because you never have a conversation where you just shut up and listen. But let me tell you, I don't know who needs to hear this, but it says, let go of the need to always contribute. And maybe I need to listen to this. Like maybe it's me, but it says, let go of the need.
Some folks, not you, but yeah.
Thank you. Let go of the need to win every argument. Tell me more about that. I love this phrase or this question. I think this is probably the most underutilized sentence in the English language because
this is you right here.
Yeah, it's huge because and assume that you're an idiot. And this is kind of, again, it's tough. It's so tough. All of these steps are not easy. Assume that you're an idiot. It talks about the book Fooled by Randomness. And he says, the quote from the author says, I try to remind my group each week that we are all idiots and know nothing, but we have the good fortune of knowing it. So the idea that of knowing the fact that we are idiots and know nothing. So it just, it talks about how, again, how we are, we have these like preconceived notions and we're always learning. And kind of, it's worth just knowing that we, like if you go to kind of like to think about like why this is important, it's just remembering that it says, everything there's something to learn from everyone and everything, right? And in terms of like those smaller victories, those small wins, going back to that kind of concept, right? It's like, every day there's an opportunity to learn something new and to grow and to, again, just try to pick up some sort of little bit of knowledge that maybe you didn't have already. And I can learn from it just about anyone. I think you'd agree with that as well, Myndrunner. I think that everyone has something that they can contribute. And I'll be the first to say, I know almost nothing because, and anyone who looks at me as an expert, I look at them really funny and I say, this is not like, you might think I'm an expert on something, but the reality is that I might have been like really, really good at it after a bunch of practice and a bunch of study and a bunch of repetition and a bunch of failing, really, at the end of the day. So I think those small victories, again, going back to the whole point of this, it's worth recognizing how far we have come as people and whatever task we're trying to accomplish, just regularly recognizing that, hey, you probably didn't think you were going to be able to even do this. And the fact that you've taken that first step is something to celebrate. And then go from there.
All right. And I'm going to try something too in just a moment. But I kind of what you said, because this is a conversation we had on Mental Health Mondays. Make sure you go to YouTube and subscribe.
Check it out.
Mental Health Mondays, our conversation there, you talked about how, asking, well, what makes you believe that, or why do you believe that? And you're getting people to explain their position and you're gaining that knowledge. But something that it's interesting, I learned this, and my dad actually shared this story with me, and I've had it happen in my own life. But I used to feel like you ever sit down in a meeting and you're with a bunch of other of your peers, and I used to feel like, man, somebody would they would answer a question about a specific topic and they knew everything about it. And then they would bring up a different topic, and this other guy over here would say, well, actually, it's because the carburetor, blah, blah, blah. And I'm sitting there like, man, these guys know so much more than I do. What I didn't realize is each of those individuals, they knew a lot about that specific topic, but they didn't know everything. And there were things that I knew more than they did. I just didn't realize that. And I didn't understand that. It's very similar to an experience I had learning boxing at VMI. Was my first boxing match ever, because you have to take boxing as a class at Virginia Military Institute.
Oh yeah.
And I remember my first match, I'm fighting a kid that's the same size as me, and I'm going in and I'm doing the technique. Of course, it's so funny because they teach us all these moves, but then right when we get in the fight, we're swinging like wild haymakers. But what's funny is I tried really hard to do the right punching, but every time I got hit, it hurt. And I felt every punch, and I'm still punching him, but he's punching me. And then at the end of the match, I'm like, man, I just got my ass kicked. But then the coach raised my hand. And I'm like, what? And then I look over at the guy, and he's like this. I didn't realize the punches that I was given I wasn't thinking about my punches, and I was nailing them. I was thinking about, man, that really hurts, man. Oh, no. And so sometimes you don't realize how much you do know, and sometimes you don't realize like that. And you got to stop comparing yourselves, but you don't realize I think it's a sign of intelligence, and this is kind of where I want to try my thing. Have you heard of the Dunning-Kruger effect? The Dunning-Kruger effect. All right, I'm going to try. I don't know if you have to authorize this or not, but I think you have to add this. But if you look up here, it's kind of tiny, but if you look up here on Wikipedia, the Dunning-Kruger effect, and I'll read this. It says, the Dunning-Kruger effect is a cognitive bias in which people with limited competence in a particular domain overestimate their abilities. Some researchers also include the opposite effect for high performers, their tendency to underestimate their skills. So what that translates for me is that if you realize how much you don't know, that's a sign of intelligence. Conversely, people that think they know what they know, they're probably dumb. They're probably dummies. I mean, or to use a lack of a better term, they don't realize how much they don't know, and therefore, they're incompetent. But I think that really goes hand in hand with, when I was a car sales manager before I became a teacher, but I worked with a rental company where we sold our rental cars. You could probably figure out it was a very enterprising company.
I bet.
It's very enterprising. There was no budget. It didn't hurt, but it was very enterprising. So
I bet. And you guys did try hard, but not harder, right?
Exactly. Yeah, there we go. Yes. But when I went to the car sales division and I worked with a senior sales associate, shout out to Leah Chu, by the way, and she made a comment to me that really stuck with me for the rest of my life. It works for every career, even life, is to be a student of your business. Always be a student of your business, which means that, if you're a firefighter, if you are a surgeon, if you are working at the toll booth, if you're collecting tolls, if you're, whatever, you're a skier, whatever, be a student of your business means you're constantly learning and being open to learning new things and always trying to better yourself, because there's no moment where I'm the best in the world. I mean, once you get to that, look, Michael Jordan, even though Michael Jordan has so much natural talent, he didn't become Michael Jordan just because by sitting on his butt. He had to practice constantly. He's constantly learning. He had to learn to not stick his tongue out after a while. So that's what I'm saying, is that you got to be a student of what you're learning about. And that goes for any task. If you're a writer, if you're trying to lose weight, don't just go, all right, I'm just going to go work out. Be a student. Look, okay, what should I be eating versus what shouldn't I? What should I stretch out? What are some exercises? Why is it important to do leg day one day and chest day another? Find those things out, and of course, be a critical thinker, because just because the internet said it's true doesn't mean it's true. But you do want to do that. You got to be a student of the business, and I think that's where you come back to those victories, is because the more you take that approach, and like you said, it takes humility, because you really have got to understand that there's always more to learn. But also, I think that the flip side of that humility is you also want to take honor in how far you have come, because I think that's the other side of the blade there, that the risk of being so overwhelmed by how much you don't know that it's depressing. You've got to also say, well, look how far I have come into this dark forest.
Absolutely.
And I think that's very important too.
No, you're spot on, Myndrunner. I think that's something that, again, we could all do a better job of, is again, I think being willing to take that step, right? Just that single step alone, and just remembering that in itself is a bit of a victory. I think that's worth remembering as we kind of go about our lives and our days. And one thing that you made me think of, and it's kind of related to where I was going to go next in this conversation, is the idea that we've talked about why it's important to celebrate the small wins and the milestones. We've talked about, given examples of how it can manifest, but also I want to just give people examples of kind of how to like practically celebrate, right? And I'm talking about like, it can be something really simple. Like it can be, for me, I'm a bit of a coffee addict. Anyone who follows me on X knows this. They know I post about coffee at least once a day, if not more.
Coffee, what's that beverage?
Exactly. I can't imagine what you're sipping on in that mug right there, Myndrunner. But I'm a huge coffee fan. I spend way too much on it on a daily basis. And sometimes instead of making my own coffee, sometimes I'll go to a local place with that symbol of something in the sky. It has something related to the sky, and it has dollar bills, another word for dollar bills in its name.
Bucks of stars.
Bucks of stars. I'll go to that place, and what I'll find is like I'll get myself something as kind of a treat to myself. And the reason why I'll do that is I will know intentionally that I'm treating myself because of X.
Yeah.
Not everyone has to do that. What I'm saying, for me, that works as the intentional decision to splurge a little bit is a way of celebrating a small victory, whether it's for getting through a rough work week. Like that in itself is enough for me to like that's a justification for me. But like people need to think about like how can you really do this practically? Go from like not celebrating these wins to actually doing them. And I'm wondering, like, do you have a couple other ideas or just thoughts of how people can just start to adopt this habit in their lives?
Absolutely. And it really comes down to individual preference. I mean, this is the BF Skinner 101 stuff. And if you in child development, if you read Vygotsky's zone of proximal development, I always use the analogy of tying shoes, because it's weird, because when I was teaching fourth grade for a couple of years, I had some kids that came to me at fourth grade, couldn't tie their shoes. And so, but again, it's not a judgment thing, but it was uncommon for students to be a fourth grade and still not be able to tie their shoes. But the getting them to that, there's that level here of I can't tie my shoes at all, and then here is I can tie my shoes by myself, and in between is okay. Well, all right, I'm going to help you tie your shoe, but you're going to do the first loop, or I'm going to help you tie your shoe. Now you get halfway, and slowly they get to the point where they can do it by themselves, and that's that zone of proximal development, is that zone between not being able to do anything at all and without someone totally doing it for you, and then being able to do it all on your own. And you've got to reward yourself with that. But the other thing with teaching with kids and with adults, and this is important with if you're a manager or a leader and you want to motivate your employees, you also got to think about this for yourself. If you are your own employee and you want to motivate yourself, you've got to find out what reinforcements do you respond to. And you like, for example, coffee works great for you, but if somebody doesn't like coffee, getting a coffee is not going to be a reinforcement. And this is where a lot of leaders, in schools, at school, they have this thing called jeans passes.
Okay.
A jeans pass. Okay. So teachers, when throughout, and this has been something going on for a long time, is teachers would wear professional dress. For me, I prefer, a button-up shirt and some slacks. That's kind of my uniform, if you will. But one of the things that was that they would do is occasionally they would allow teachers to wear jeans. Now you got to think about this is in the teaching in the education system. Most teachers are female. And so when they wear jeans, it's kind of the mommy jeans, and look at us dancing. And so that be what a shift happened in the education system, where they started doing this thing where we'll allow you to wear jeans if you earn it, but you've got to earn the right to wear jeans. Now, the assumption, or the pitch was, if you're because wearing jeans is not as professional as wearing other attire. And But if you earned a jeans pass, you can submit that pass to your teacher and wear jeans and like some kind of school related shirt with it. Which is interesting because if you wore jeans and you didn't turn your jeans pass in, how could anybody tell, the difference, what have you? That's a whole other thing. But what was interesting is that became like this monetary system that principals would use under the assumption that every teacher wanted to wear jeans. But teachers like myself and a few others, I don't like to wear jeans. I prefer a nice, comfortable pair of slacks. I prefer, I would always like trade them off and like, hey, you know what? Hey, can you grade these papers for me? And I'll give you the jeans, all that kind of stuff. But you've got to know what motivates your individual people. And a lot of leaders, they make these assumptions like, here's a gift card to Chick-fil-A. And you give it to somebody that's vegan, or you give it to somebody that doesn't like Chick-fil-A.
Yeah.
And that also goes for yourself, is really think about what motivates you. What would be a celebration, and sometimes it could be a treat. It could be a donut. It could be a Starbucks. It could be that Back to the Future action figure that you've had your eye on in eBay for years. You'd say, all right, you know what? I'm going to get it.
Yep.
I'm coming for you. That kind of thing.
For sure. No, that's fantastic advice, Myndrunner. I think that's, it's like, know what's going to resonate, know what's actually meaningful to the person on the other side, right? Or the recipient of whatever, excuse me, is going on. Like if you're giving out a gift card or whatever. And also you should know what resonates with yourself, right? Mm-hmm. At the end of the day, we're talking about celebrating small wins, victories, milestones, excuse me.
Yeah. And you can actually get lost in that a little bit too. You can get lost in trying to find what motivates you. Like you don't want to oversaturate it. Like you don't want to be like, hey, I put my shoes on today. I'm going to go spend $100 now. No, it's got to be proportional.
Exactly.
You got to, but again, if you do have that victory, like, okay, let's use my weight loss program. If I go to the gym, if I do leg day, if I do 100 squats this week, which would be a tremendous accomplishment this week. If I do 100 squats this week, then I'm going to go order that. I'm going to go order the Danhausen figure from Ringside Collectibles. But if I only did 10, all right, maybe getting a Gatorade is probably a better treat for me, versus that.
Yeah, it's knowing the there's this phrase in the military called the law of proportionality, right? Mm-hmm. It's like know what's proportional to your success, or and so like for you, example, it's a fantastic example. It's like you love that Danhausen, so
yes.
So you want that collectible figure, and so you do the 100 squats, you get that. It makes sense, like as a victory, and you kind of
and I did the 100 squats.
There you go.
I did the 100 squats, and now look, behold.
Look at that. I love the
very nice, very evil.
Very evil. There you go. And it's spooky season, so it's perfect time for him. And fun fact, I do have an autograph from him, as well as a photo. I'll share with you maybe in DMs once we hang up from this recording. But I actually he was here in town for one of the recent Starcasts, and I was fortunate enough to get him he was pointing, I think, and so we had it was a great photo opportunity. It was well worth the however much I paid for it. I don't remember exactly how much.
Many sacks of money.
Many sacks of money. So he could buy a blimp, right? And so he could
pretty much. And some teeth. And some of your teeth.
I love that guy, and hopefully maybe one of these days I'll have him on the Ignite That Light podcast. Yes. But I think it's a perfect segue to kind of wrap up Myndrunner on a positive note. I think just kind of I appreciate you being here, appreciate your insight and your wisdom, and want to again celebrate you for being here and acknowledge you for being here, Myndrunner, on this and having this conversation with me. I want to give you the opportunity. The floor is yours to share maybe some parting words and let people know a little more about you and kind of what they should take away from this conversation.
Absolutely. And we like to have fun, jokes aside. I think levity is important. You can't take yourself too seriously. You've got to be able to laugh at yourself. And, and I think one of the things that, one of the reasons I got into the Mental Health Mondays is I wanted to share stories of other people just like us out there. And when I say that just like us, that means all of us are human. And I think we have a lot more in common than we think. And we tend to dwell, kind of going back to the, focusing on the failures, not the victories. We tend to focus on how different we are from each other without realizing how similar we are. I mean, we're if you look at our DNA structure, we're very, very similar. There's not much that separates us from each other. And in the mental health struggle, we're all trying to figure this stuff out. And I feel like these stories, they've helped me just in interviewing people and chatting with people and listening to their stories and their insights. And you don't have to agree with everybody, but I've learned a lot about mental health. I've learned and again, these aren't necessarily experts in the field. These aren't necessarily doctors, except for Dr. Poppy. She is a doctor, but it's people. And that's what it's important. And that's what I think is important for us to remember is we are human. And I highly suggest people check it out. If it's your bag, if you enjoy it, hit that subscribe button, hit the likes if you like them. And yeah, and if there's something you'd like to see or you think something that you can improve, let me know. Hit the comments. But more importantly, in general, advice for people is don't underestimate how powerful it is to just dive in and go for it. Go for what you want. Don't, if you are intimidated by what you don't know, dive in, find out, and then you can only get better from there. And you aren't alone. There's so many of us feeling the same way. Just go for it. And then when you on your track record for achieving your goals, make sure you take that time to treat yourself. Treat yourself. Treat yourself.
Well said. I think that's a fantastic way to wrap this up, Myndrunner. And make sure you do treat yourself. Make sure that if you're listening to this, watching this, make sure that you do take time to celebrate those small wins and milestones in your life. Don't let these days pass without embracing what you have accomplished and what you've achieved. And remember that, right? And I think as you, hopefully future listeners of this podcast, viewers of this episode, I want everyone to hear this from me, that you cannot go through life only trying to celebrate the big wins and the home runs in your life. The small wins are just as important in my mind. And hopefully this conversation has given everyone a little bit of food for thought. And with that, I will wrap this up. Thank you so much, Myndrunner, for your time today. Yes, the glorious, the wonderful Myndrunner. Yes, and I am at Positively Chris on X. Find me over there. Follow me. Follow Myndrunner, and find us maybe in some X spaces one of these days. And we'll see you again next week on Ignite That Light. Thank you.
Ignite that light.